All right, everybody. My name is Mauricio here. Welcome back to another Webinar Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's webinar it's different. So we're going to cover a little bit of an interesting topic that has come across my table very often, and it's about non-US citizen buyers. So there's so much confusion and misinformation regarding this topic out there. So I wanted to just clear up the confusions by just reviewing the details that will help you assist your non-US citizen home buyers. And it's my hope that you learn just a little bit about the process, a little bit about the different loan programs, and just get answers to questions or concerns that you have. So let's just jump right into it and get started. So thanks again for coming. All right, so you may be wondering why this topic is such an issue with lenders. And part of the problem is that the agencies that create the underwriting guidelines, such as Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, and USDA, are not very specific. So they just leave a lot of interpretation to the lenders to decide for themselves. And since the lenders are not on the hook if something goes wrong with the loan, they tend to be more conservative when they do not have strong guidance or knowledge in this area of the business. So this is the main reason as to why you will see the guidelines vary significantly between lenders. The first step, obviously, is just clearing up the confusion. It's just really understanding the terminology. So that is used across all the stages in lending. And this is followed by, a way to understand how the immigration process really works. So it's been my experience that when both of these are a little bit clearer, it helps to eliminate a lot of confusion caused by the topic itself. All right, so let's just talk a little bit about the terminology on this one and sort of like describe them a little bit in depth. So the very first one, a permanent resident, exactly like it sounds, is someone that has been granted the right to live and work in the US permanently. When we look into the non-permanent residents, they have been granted a status to live in the US, but on a non-permanent basis. So depending on the type of visa they hold, they may have the right to work. If they do, the lender will request an employment authorization document, and this document is either an actual card or in many cases just the right to work. It's contained in their visa type. So that's something to keep an eye on whenever you see those immigration documents. Another kind of immigrants is those who are here as an asylee or refugee. This is one of the most common ones that you hear in the news nowadays. Asylee or refugee status just means that someone enters the country pleading harm or danger in their country of origin. So if a hearing is granted and the court grants the status of asylee or refugee, then a person with that status has the right to live and work here in the US starting the day they're given that status. So once they've been in the country for a year, they may apply for a permanent residency and then they get the green card at that point, and this makes them a permanent resident of the United States. So it's important to know and consider that with this status, lenders will seek still a verifiable employment history. So just because they become a permanent resident, but they don't have necessarily a work history established, that might be an issue with programs because they still have to follow the same rules as if they were US citizens. So that's something very important to keep in mind. So a little bit more this section here, just another sort of like terminology is naturalization. And this is something that I personally went through, and it is a process of applying for citizenship. And when a person is granted this status, then they become a naturalized citizen of the United States. So the next one we have is a foreign national, and it just simply means that the person is not a citizen of the country they're living in. So for example, if I lived in, let's say, like France, I'll be a foreign national in France. But if someone from France lives in the US, then they're a foreign national in the US. We have our temporary protected status, which is it's given to the US. It's giving in the US for just a short period of time. And this usually happens when there is a conflict in another country and people of that country are just offered a temporary protected status here in the US. When it's over, the person needs to just return to their country, or they can stay if they have been granted another type of status. And then finally, a very common one as well, it's DACA or C-33, which is the status that has been given. You see in the news a lot lately as well. And it's something that Congress is just trying to resolve this ongoing situation. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in later slides, but basically it just stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And this status is given to those brought here as children, and they have lived here for most of their life and they don't know any other country. So it's a very important one to cover as well. So we'll dive into a little bit deeper later on into the webinar. Okay, so let's jump into one of the things that lenders look for in a non-US citizen applicant. So this is something that we dive a little bit deeper on the different requirements that we'll need. So the lenders, they first take a look to ensure that the applicant is legally present in the country. And this is a basic requirement of all agencies. So it could be Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, you name them. The second thing they look for is the social security number, which means the applicant can legally work in the US. Now, the following two items are details that we look for in every client, whether they're a US citizen or not. First, does the applicant have an employment history? That's very important. And if so, for how long? Any borrower must have an employment history to get a mortgage. So that is regardless of your citizenship status, that's a mortgage requirement. And of course, if the income is an eligible income type, so people who are paid cash and cannot document income, unfortunately, they will not be able to demonstrate an eligible income type, whether they're a citizen or not. But those people who can show an eligible income type, like pay stubs, tax returns, and W-2s, they will be eligible for lending purposes. This is a big one, and it's come up a lot lately. This is one of my expertise in the field, so I deal with it on a daily basis. And it is, what's the difference between a social security number and an ITIN number? So let's just dive into this one and talk about the differences between the two. An ITIN, it stands for an individual tax identification number, and it is simply a tax processing number issued to those who are not permitted by the Department of Homeland Security to work in the US, but they may need it for any other purposes. So an example of those who apply for an ITIN number are like international students or the spouse of a visa holder, right? And they may be allowed to reside in the US, but they're not necessarily permitted under the visa type to work here. In addition to that, this number is also issued to those who are not eligible for a social security number. And then we have the social security number that can only be issued to those who are permitted to work here in the US, and therefore it's given to both US citizens and also those who are non-US citizens but are permitted to work in the US based on their status. So let's talk about standard documentation that we can come across when we do type of loans for folks who are not US citizens. And when the lender is working with an applicant who's not a US citizen, they need to verify that the status of the applicant holds allows them to live and work in the US, right? The lender is also looking for the likelihood that that borrower will be able to remain in the US to live and work. And then that way they can fulfill their mortgage obligations. So that's very important for the lenders. Makes sense, the ability to repay. Usually this documentation includes a permanent resident card, which is also known as a green card. That's most commonly known as that. We have, they also call it an I-551 stamp, one of those different ones in there too. We have the work visa, an entry stamp such as I-94, you'll see that a lot, in an EAD, which is an employment authorization document, or a visa type that includes the right to work. So that's always the key, have that terminology in there. The I-551 stamp, it's a stamp on the applicant's passport. that designates that person as an immigrant who's been granted permanent residency. So if the applicant has the stamp, they will also likely have a copy of their application, which is a form I-765, which shows that they have applied for the permanent residence or their green card here in the US. All right, so let's talk a little bit about employment and credit history. So once the lender has verified the status, they verify employment, they verify the credit history, just like any other borrower. We need to consider the employment history to ensure that it meets the standard guidelines, regardless of citizenship status. So this is, now we get to a point where we're not talking about citizenship itself, it's just the ability to repay the loan. Then we also move into the credit history to determine if the applicant has credit score or if we need to use non-traditional credit, again, just like any other file. Income continuity. So this is a big one because we need to verify that all the income that we document will continue, which simply means that we seek whether the income will continue, it will stop after a certain year. So we just have to dig a little bit deeper into how that ability to repay will be fulfilled. And after all, if it doesn't appear that the income will continue, it just might be hard to pay that mortgage back, right? So it's something that lenders look into it regardless of the status. Most type of incomes like base pay, bonuses, overtime, or commission, they don't typically require the lender to verify continuity. Generally, the history of just receiving the type of income demonstrate the fact that it will continue. So it will be mainly for folks who are they don't have stable jobs for stable incomes, and we don't see a pattern. All right, so just like I mentioned earlier, I would just jump a little bit more into the DACA status applicants. You may also heard DACA as a dreamer, so that's a big one as well. Whenever they have a visa status classified as C-33, which it all means the same thing. This status was created for children who were brought to the US and they have been here so long that this is the only country they know. So they're with this status, folks that have this status, they're not children anymore, but they were just brought in here a very long time ago when they were kids. So that number is about 700,000 right now at the moment, and they're between the ages of 18 and 36. And the status was mainly created to allow those who qualify to seek like employment and protect them from deportation, which is the biggest thing. So we have our investor Fannie Mae and FHA, they will allow DACA status. So that's a big opportunity for our clients with that status to be able to obtain a mortgage. So that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that this was good information for you and sort of like, we're able to just identify different ways that we can help our non-US citizens. A lot of the times it really comes down to information and just the more you know, the more informed you are, the more opportunities we have to help those folks. So that's always the end goal with this webinar is to make sure that we're doing so for our clients. So thank you again. We hope to see you on the next webinar. Remember, we do them on Wednesdays, so just keep an eye out for those reminders. And yeah, thank you so much and hope to see you again. Bye-bye.